The security cameras captured everything, but nobody was watching. In the corner of the empty corporate cafeteria, past midnight, a janitor sat hunched over a plastic container, eating cold pasta with a broken fork. She didn't know that the man who would change her life forever was standing just outside the glass doors, frozen by what he saw. What happened next would shake the foundation of everything she believed about herself, and everything he thought he knew about success. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights hummed their lonely tune as Elena Rodriguez pushed her cart through the maze of cubicles on the 42nd floor of Meridian Towers. It was 11:47 p.m., and the corporate world had long since emptied, leaving behind only the ghosts of ambition and the lingering scent of expensive coffee. Elena moved with practiced efficiency, her weathered hands working methodically as she emptied trash bins and wiped down surfaces that would be messy again by noon tomorrow. She had been invisible here for 3 years. Invisible to the executives who rushed past her in their tailored suits. Invisible to the middle managers who acted like she was part of the furniture. Invisible to everyone except the security guard who nodded at her each night when she clocked in. But tonight, someone was watching. Someone who shouldn't have been there at all. Chen stood motionless behind the frosted glass partition, his breath fogging the surface as he observed the woman 20 feet away. To her, he was just another late-night worker, maybe an accountant pulling an all-nighter, someone unremarkable in his wrinkled khakis and faded polo shirt. The fake name tag clipped to his pocket read, "Danny IT Support," but the truth was far more complicated. Chen was the CEO of Meridian Industries, a man whose signature appeared on paychecks for 12,000 employees, whose decisions moved stock prices, whose corner office commanded a view of the entire city skyline. For the past month, he had been living a lie, working the graveyard shift as a supposed IT support specialist, sleeping in a studio apartment in Queens instead of his penthouse in Manhattan, taking the subway instead of his private car. The board members thought he was on an extended business trip in Asia. His assistant believed he was conducting due diligence on potential acquisitions. Only Daniel knew the real reason he had stripped away every comfort, every privilege, every marker of his success to walk among the people who made his empire run. He needed to understand what he had built. More importantly, he needed to understand what it had cost. Elena finished the last row of desks and made her way toward the break room, unaware that her every movement was being studied by eyes that had learned to see profit margins before people. The wheels of her cart squeaked softly against the polished marble floor, a sound that had become part of the building's nighttime symphony. She paused at the threshold of the executive break room, a space she cleaned but had never truly occupied, and something in her posture shifted. Daniel watched as she glanced around the empty room, then slowly walked to the gleaming espresso machine that cost more than she made in 2 months. Her fingers traced the chrome surface reverently, and for a moment he saw longing flicker across her features before she turned away and returned to her work. She unpacked her own dinner from a worn thermal bag, something that looked like leftover spaghetti in a cracked plastic container, and sat down at the small table in the corner. That's when Daniel saw it. The way she ate with careful, measured bites, making the small portion last. The way she glanced toward the refrigerator full of gourmet snacks and premium beverages that were restocked daily for employees who rarely bothered to eat them. The way she pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket and studied it while she ate, her brow furrowed with concentration. The scene hit him like cold water. 3 years ago, he had been a different kind of hungry. Not for food, but for validation, for success, for the respect that money could buy. He had climbed his way out of a childhood marked by food stamps and eviction notices, building Meridian Industries from a small consulting firm into a multinational corporation. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten what real hunger looked like. He had forgotten that success measured in quarterly reports meant nothing if it came at the cost of human dignity. Elena finished her meager dinner and carefully washed her container in the small sink, drying it with paper towels before placing it back in her bag. She pulled out a thermos and poured herself what appeared to be coffee, though Daniel suspected it was the cheap instant kind that came in bulk containers, not the artisan blends that filled the executive break room. She sat back down and unfolded that piece of paper again, and this time Daniel could see what it was. A report card. Straight A's across the board, signed with a flourish by someone named Elena Rodriguez. A daughter. Elena was a mother. The realization settled in Daniel's chest, like a weight he hadn't expected. He had been so focused on profits and productivity that he had never bothered to learn the personal stories of the people who kept his company running after hours. Elena wasn't just a line item in a budget or a name on a payroll register. She was someone's mother, someone who worked through the night so her daughter could succeed in school, someone who ate alone in corporate break rooms while dreaming of better things. Daniel stepped back from the partition, his hand shaking slightly. He needed air. He needed space to think. But as he turned to leave, his shoulder caught the edge of a filing cabinet, sending a small potted plant crashing to the floor. The sound echoed through the empty office like a gunshot. Elena's head snapped up, her dark eyes scanning the shadows beyond the break room. Daniel froze, caught between the instinct to run and the realization that he had nowhere to hide. Their eyes met through the glass, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Sorry," Daniel called out, his voice carrying the nervous edge of someone caught where they didn't belong. "Didn't mean to startle you. Just grabbing some files from the server room." Elena relaxed slightly, her hand moving away from the panic button on her belt. "No problem. These late nights make everyone jumpy." Her voice was warm despite the weariness in her posture. "You're the new IT guy, right? Danny?" Daniel nodded, grateful for the dim lighting that hid the flush creeping up his neck. "Yeah. Still getting used to the layout of this place. It's bigger than it looks." "Tell me about it. I've been cleaning here for 3 years and I still get lost sometimes." Elena's smile was genuine but tired. "You working late on something important?" The question was innocent enough, but it landed with unexpected force. Was he working on something important? Was infiltrating his own company, spying on his own employees, important? Or was it just another elaborate form of guilt management, a way to feel better about the distance between his corner office and the reality of the people who made his success possible? "Just trying to understand how things really work around here," Daniel said finally. Surprised by the honesty in his own voice, Elena studied him for a moment, her head tilted slightly. "You look like you could use some coffee. Real coffee, not the fancy stuff they keep in the executive kitchen. I've got a thermos if you want to share." The offer was simple, but it carried a weight that Daniel felt in his bones. When was the last time someone had offered him something without wanting something in return? When was the last time anyone had seen him as just another person who might need kindness on a difficult night? "I don't want to take your coffee," Daniel said, stepping closer to the break room door. "Looks like you've got a long night ahead." Elena shrugged, already pouring. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now, back to the story. Coffee into the thermos cap. "So do you, by the looks of it. Besides, my grandmother always said coffee tastes better when it's shared with someone who needs it." She handed him the cup, and their fingers brushed briefly as he accepted it. The coffee was indeed instant, slightly bitter, nothing like the premium blends that filled his executive suite. But it was warm, and it was offered freely, and it tasted like something he had been missing without realizing it. "Thank you," Daniel said, and meant it more than he had meant anything in recent memory. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two people sharing coffee in an empty corporate tower, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Elena folded the report card and slipped it back into her pocket, but not before Daniel caught another glimpse of those perfect grades. "Your daughter?" he asked gently. Elena's face lit up with a pride that transformed her tired features. "Isabella. She's 8, and already smarter than her mother. Wants to be a marine biologist when she grows up. Says she's going to discover new species in the deepest parts of the ocean." "That's incredible." "She must get her intelligence from you." Elena laughed, but there was something hollow in the sound. "I dropped out of high school when I got pregnant. Been trying to get my GED ever since, but between work and taking care of her." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Sorry, you probably don't want to hear about all that." But Daniel did want to hear about it. He wanted to understand how someone could work nights in a corporate tower while raising a brilliant daughter, how someone could maintain hope and dignity while being overlooked and undervalued. He wanted to know Elena's story, Not because it might make him feel better about his own choices, but because it might help him make better ones. "I'd like to hear about it," he said simply. "If you don't mind sharing." Elena looked at him with surprise, as if she wasn't used to anyone being genuinely interested in her life. "You sure? I've got about 6 hours left on my shift, and once I start talking about Isabella, I tend to go on a bit." "I've got 6 hours too," Daniel replied. "And I can't think of anything more important to hear about than a future marine biologist." The smile that spread across Elena's face was worth more than any quarterly earnings report Daniel had ever read. They settled into the break room chairs, two people separated by circumstances but connected by the simple human need to be seen and heard. Elena told him about Isabella's latest science project, about the struggles of raising a gifted child on a janitor's salary, about the dreams she had put on hold and the ones she was determined to make possible for her daughter. Daniel found himself sharing, too, carefully edited stories about growing up poor, about the hunger that had driven him to succeed, about the loneliness that success had brought. He couldn't tell her who he really was, but he could tell her pieces of his truth, fragments of the man he had been before the corner office, and the stock options, and the weight of 12,000 employees depending on his decisions. As the night wore on, Elena returned to her work, but their conversation continued as she moved through the offices. Daniel found reasons to linger, helping her move furniture, holding her cart steady as she reached high shelves, listening to stories about the other late-night workers who had become her friends over the years. She told him about Miguel in security, who shared pictures of his grandchildren and always saved her a piece of birthday cake when someone in the building celebrated. She told him about Sarah from the overnight call center on the 15th floor, who practiced her college presentations while Elena cleaned around her. "You get to know people differently when you see them at 3 in the morning," Elena said as she wiped down a conference table that had hosted a board meeting earlier that day. "People are more honest when they're tired. More real." Daniel thought about the board meetings that happened around that very table, about the decisions made in sterile conference rooms by people who had never met Elena, who saw her only as a line item in an operating budget. How many Elenas were there in his company? How many brilliant children were being raised by parents who worked invisible jobs to keep his empire running? "Elena," Daniel said as she packed up her supplies near the end of her shift, "can I ask you something?" She looked up from her cart, hair escaping from her ponytail, face flushed from hours of physical work. "Sure. If you could change one thing about this place, about working here, what would it be?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, her hands stilling on the spray bottle she had been organizing. "Honestly, I'd want people to see us, really see us. Not just as the people who empty their trash or clean their offices, but as people with families and dreams and struggles. I'd want them to know that the woman who cleans their desk is also the woman who helps her daughter with algebra homework and reads marine biology books from the library so she can answer questions about dolphins and coral reefs." She paused, then shook her head with a self-conscious laugh. "But that's probably asking too much. Most people in this building don't even know my name." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest, a fissure in the armor he had built around his success. Elena was wrong about one thing. Someone in this building did know her name now. Someone had seen her, really seen her, and that someone was going to make sure things changed. "I know your name," Daniel said quietly. "Elena Rodriguez, mother of Isabella, future marine biologist, woman who makes the best instant coffee I've ever had." Elena smiled, but there was something sad in her eyes. "Thanks, Danny. That means more than you know." As she wheeled her cart toward the service elevator, Daniel stood alone in the gleaming office space, surrounded by the monuments to corporate success that suddenly felt hollow. Through the windows, dawn was beginning to break over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably walking to catch a bus that would take her to a small apartment where a brilliant 8-year-old was getting ready for school, full of dreams about ocean exploration and scientific discovery. Daniel pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He began typing, not the usual corporate speak that filled his days, but something real and urgent and necessary. A plan was forming in his mind, not for quarterly growth or market expansion, but for something that mattered more than stock prices or board approval. He was going to change Elena's world. He was going to change everything. But first, he needed to keep being Danny from IT support for a little while longer. Because Elena had taught him something in those 6 hours that no business school or corporate consultant ever could. She had taught him that the most important stories in any company aren't found in annual reports or strategic plans. They're found in the quiet moments after midnight, when tired people share coffee and dreams and the radical kindness of really seeing each other. The next evening, Daniel arrived at Meridian Towers with a purpose that had nothing to do with his cover story. He had spent the day researching educational programs, scholarship funds, and corporate policies that existed only in the aspirational sections of employee handbooks. He had also made several phone calls to people who owed him favors, people who could make things happen quietly and quickly. Elena was already at work when he found her, methodically cleaning the 20th floor with the same careful attention she had shown the night before. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, her face brightening with recognition. "Danny! Back for another all-nighter?" "Something like that," Daniel replied, pulling a small package from his backpack. "I brought you something." Elena looked at the wrapped box with surprise and suspicion. "You didn't need to bring me anything." "It's not much. Just something I thought Isabella might like." Elena's expression softened as she carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a book about marine biology, its pages filled with stunning photographs of deep-sea creatures and coral reefs. But it wasn't just any book. It was a signed copy from Dr. Sarah Martinez, one of the world's leading marine biologists, with a personal inscription that read, "For Isabella, a future colleague in ocean exploration, never stop asking questions about the wonders beneath the waves." Elena's hands trembled as she read the inscription, her eyes filling with tears. Who is Dr. Sarah Martinez?" "She's a professor at Columbia, one of the leading researchers in marine biology. I found her contact information online and told her about Isabella's dreams. She was happy to sign a book for a future scientist." The truth was more complicated than that. Daniel had donated $50,000 to Dr. Martinez's research lab and requested this small favor in return. But Elena didn't need to know about the money. She only needed to know that someone believed in her daughter's dreams enough to make them feel real and achievable. "I can't accept this," Elena whispered, though her grip on the book suggested otherwise. "This must have cost." It cost one phone call and a 15-minute conversation with a professor who loves talking about the ocean. Daniel lied smoothly. "Besides, Isabella's going to be a famous marine biologist someday. I want to be able to say I knew her when she was 8. Elena laughed through her tears, clutching the book to her chest. She's going to flip when she sees this. She's been checking out every marine biology book from the library, but they're all so old and worn out. This is beautiful." They spent the next hour talking about Isabella's latest projects and questions, about the science fair she was preparing for, about her dream of swimming with dolphins. Daniel found himself genuinely invested in the education of a child he had never met, a girl whose future seemed brighter and more important than any corporate acquisition he had ever pursued. As the weeks passed, Daniel established a routine. He would arrive at Meridian Towers each evening, ostensibly to work on IT projects that conveniently required him to be in the same areas Elena was cleaning. Their conversations became the highlight of his days, brief interludes of genuine human connection in a life that had become increasingly isolated by success and responsibility. He learned that Elena was indeed working toward her GED, studying during her breaks and on weekends when Isabella was at school. He learned that she had been saving for 2 years to buy her daughter a used computer, something that would help with research projects and online learning. He learned that Elena's greatest fear wasn't poverty or exhaustion, but that Isabella would lose her love of learning because the world didn't offer enough opportunities for girls like her. Daniel began leaving small gifts for Elena to find during her shifts, a new thermos to replace her cracked one, a set of highlighters and notebooks that appeared on her cart with a note saying they were extras from the supply closet, study guides for the GED that materialized in the break room with a post-it note claiming they had been left behind by a former employee. Elena accepted these gifts with gratitude and suspicion, clearly wondering how Danny from IT support could afford to be so generous on what she assumed was a modest salary. But she never questioned him directly, perhaps afraid that too many questions might make the kindness stop. The turning point came on a Thursday night in October, 3 months after their first meeting. Daniel arrived at work to find Elena sitting in the break room, her head in her hands, her cart abandoned in the hallway. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Daniel felt his chest tighten with concern. "Elena? What happened?" She looked up, her face streaked with tears, her usual composure completely shattered. "I'm sorry. I know I should be working. Forget about work for a minute. Tell me what's wrong." Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks on her cheek. "Isabella needs surgery. Her appendix. We're at the hospital now, my neighbor is with her. But I had to come to work because I can't afford to miss a shift. The insurance will cover most of it, but there's still a deductible and I've been saving for her computer. But now, all of that money has to go to medical bills." She dissolved into tears again, the weight of trying to hold everything together finally becoming too much to bear. Daniel felt something break inside him, a wall he had built between his personal feelings and his professional responsibilities. He couldn't be Danny from IT support anymore. Not when Elena was suffering. Not when Isabella was in a hospital bed. "How much do you need?" Daniel asked quietly. "I can't borrow money from you. You've already done too much. I'm not offering a loan. I'm asking how much you need." Elena stared at him, confusion and hope warring in her expression. "The deductible is $1,500. But Danny, you can't. Consider it handled." "What do you mean, handled?" Daniel pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. In 30 seconds, he had transferred $5,000 to an account he had Elena help him set up months earlier, ostensibly for emergency IT support funds. It was a fiction that had allowed him to help her without raising questions, but now he needed her to understand that this wasn't about work policies or employee assistance programs. "Check your bank account," he said simply. Elena's hands shook as she pulled out her own phone, navigating to her banking app with trembling fingers. When she saw the balance, she went completely still. "Danny, this is $5,000. I can't accept this. Where did you even get this kind of money?" Daniel took a deep breath, knowing that the next words would change everything between them. "Because my name isn't Danny, it's Daniel Chen. And I'm not from IT support." Elena blinked at him, processing the words but not their meaning. "I don't understand." "I'm the CEO of this company, Elena. I own Meridian Industries." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at him as if he had just told her he was from another planet, her mouth opening and closing without sound. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "You're lying." "I'm not. Prove it." Daniel pulled out his real phone, the one with direct lines to board members and government officials, and showed her his contact list. He showed her emails with his real signature, his real title, his real authority. He watched as Elena's face cycled through disbelief, recognition, and finally, devastating betrayal. "You've been lying to me for 3 months. Yes, everything you told me, everything we talked about, it was all a lie. The conversations were real. My past, my interest in Isabella, my respect for you, that was all real. The only lie was my name and my job title." Elena stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward, the crash echoing through the empty office. "You watched me struggle. You listened to me worry about money, about Isabella's future, about whether I could afford her education. And you could have helped me from the beginning, but instead you made it into some kind of game." "It wasn't a game, Elena. I was trying to understand." "Understand what?" "How the poor people live. How grateful we are for scraps. Did you enjoy watching me eat alone every night, knowing you could afford to feed 100 families with your pocket change?" The accusation hit Daniel like a physical blow, partly because it contained enough truth to hurt. He had been studying her, hadn't he? Learning about her life like she was a subject in an experiment, rather than a person deserving of dignity and honesty. "I enjoyed talking with you," Daniel said quietly. "I enjoyed learning about Isabella, about your dreams, about your strength. I've never met anyone like you, Elena. Someone who works so hard for other people, who finds joy in small things, who never gave up hope even when everything was stacked against you. And you thought lying to me was the best way to show your appreciation?" Elena was crying again, But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of humiliation, of realizing that her moments of vulnerability had been witnessed by someone with the power to change her life, but who had chosen to watch instead. "I thought if you knew who I was, you wouldn't be yourself around me. People change when they know I have money and power. They tell me what they think I want to hear instead of the truth. So you decided to trick me into being honest with you? I decided to give us both a chance to be real with each other." Elena laughed bitterly, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "Real? You want to know what's real, Mr. Chen? What's real is that I trusted you. What's real is that I thought someone finally saw me as more than just a cleaning lady. What's real is that I was starting to—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter what I was starting to feel. It was all based on a lie." She gathered her things with jerky, angry movements, stuffing her thermos and notebooks into her bag without care. "Keep your money. I'll figure out how to pay Isabella's medical bills myself. I always have before. Elena, please. Don't let pride put your daughter at risk." She whirled around, her eyes blazing. "Don't you dare talk to me about pride. And don't you dare use my daughter to manipulate me into accepting your charity. It's not charity. It's help from someone who cares about you. Someone who cares about me would have been honest with me from the beginning." Elena walked toward the service elevator, her back straight despite the tears streaming down her face. Daniel followed her, desperate to find words that could bridge the chasm that had opened between them. "Elena, wait. Let me explain." She turned around one more time, her hand on the elevator call button. "You want to explain? Then explain this. How many other employees are you spying on? How many other people's private struggles are you turning into your personal entertainment?" The elevator doors opened, and Elena stepped inside without waiting for an answer. As the doors began to close, she looked at Daniel one last time. "I quit," she said simply. And then, she was gone, leaving Daniel alone in the hallway with the sound of his own heartbeat and the growing realization that he had just lost something irreplaceable, something that all his money and power couldn't buy back. He had lost Elena's trust, her friendship, and possibly her chance at the better life she deserved. The weeks that followed were the longest of Daniel's professional life. He returned to his corner office, resumed his role as CEO, and tried to focus on the quarterly reports and strategic planning sessions that had once consumed his attention. But he couldn't stop thinking about Elena, about Isabella, about the way Elena's face had looked when she realized he had been lying to her for months. He had his assistant quietly check on Elena's employment status and learned that she had indeed quit, giving notice the very next day and refusing to provide a forwarding address or phone number. Attempts to reach her through HR were met with legal threats from a lawyer Elena had somehow acquired, demanding that Meridian Industries cease all contact with his client. Daniel tried to focus on implementing the changes he had planned during his undercover months. He established scholarship programs for children of hourly employees, improved healthcare coverage for part-time workers, and created advancement opportunities for custodial and maintenance staff. The board praised his newfound focus on employee welfare, attributing it to successful corporate espionage initiatives. But every positive change felt hollow, without Elena there to see it. Every policy improvement was a reminder of conversations they had shared, dreams she had confided, hopes he had learned about during those late-night talks in empty offices. He had gained insight into his company's culture, but he had lost the person who had made that insight possible. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after Elena's departure, in the form of an unexpected phone call. Daniel was reviewing budget projections when his assistant announced that Dr. Sarah Martinez was on the line, calling about a scholarship application. "Dr. Martinez," Daniel said, confused. "I wasn't aware we were processing any scholarship applications through Columbia." "We're not," Dr. Martinez replied. "I'm calling about Elena Rodriguez. Her mother submitted an application for our youth marine biology program, and Isabella's essay was so exceptional that I wanted to personally review her background. When I saw the mother's employment history, I recognized the name Elena Rodriguez from our previous correspondence about the signed book. Daniel's heart stopped. Isabella applied for your program? She wrote about wanting to study coral reef restoration and ocean conservation. But more than that, she wrote about her mother's sacrifices, about working night shifts to pay for her education, about learning to be strong and determined by watching a parent who never gave up. It was one of the most moving applications I've ever read. Daniel closed his eyes, picturing Isabella at 8 years old, already writing about her dreams with the eloquence of someone much older. Is she being accepted into the program? That's why I'm calling. The program is fully funded, but we have additional resources available for exceptional candidates. I wanted to ask if you thought the family would be interested in a full scholarship that includes summer research opportunities, mentorship, and a college fund for Isabella's future marine biology education. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, a lightness he hadn't experienced since Elena walked out of his life. Dr. Martinez, I think that would be perfect, but I need to ask you to handle all communication directly with Elena Rodriguez. Don't mention my name or Meridian Industries. This needs to come entirely from Columbia and your research program. Of course. May I ask why the discretion is necessary? Because the best gifts are the ones people earn themselves. And Elena Rodriguez has earned everything good that comes her way. After hanging up, Daniel sat in his office staring out at the city skyline, thinking about a woman who was probably working another cleaning job somewhere, still fighting for her daughter's future, still believing in dreams even after being disappointed by people she had trusted. He hoped that Dr. Martinez's call would bring Elena some joy, some validation that her sacrifices were worthwhile, and her daughter's potential was being recognized. 2 months later, Daniel was leaving his office late one evening when he saw a familiar figure in the lobby. Elena stood near the information desk, wearing a navy blue dress he had never seen before, her hair styled differently, carrying herself with a confidence that was both familiar and new. She was talking to the security guard, and from their body language, it appeared to be a friendly conversation rather than a request for access. Daniel's first instinct was to approach her, but he forced himself to hang back and observe. Elena looked well. More than well, she looked happy. The exhaustion that had always shadowed her features was gone, replaced by something that looked like hope fulfilled. After a few minutes, Elena shook hands with the security guard and turned toward the exit. Daniel followed at a distance, not wanting to intrude but unable to resist the chance to see how she was doing. She walked with purpose toward the subway entrance, and Daniel noticed she was carrying what appeared to be a college textbook under her arm. Unable to contain his curiosity any longer, Daniel quickened his pace. "Elena?" She turned around, and when she saw him, her expression cycled through surprise, wariness, and something that might have been forgiveness before settling into polite neutrality. "Mr. Chen." "You look good," Daniel said, then immediately felt foolish for the personal comment. "I mean, you look well. Happy." Elena studied his face for a moment before responding. "I am well, thank you for asking. I saw you in the lobby. Are you working here again?" I was visiting Miguel. He's retiring next week, and I wanted to say goodbye." Elena shifted the textbook to her other arm. "I start college next month, marine biology program at Brooklyn College. Turns out Isabella isn't the only Rodriguez who can get scholarships." Daniel felt his chest swell with pride and happiness for her, even though he had played no part in her success. "That's incredible, Elena, you did it." "We did it, Isabella and I. Turns out when you quit a job that was holding you back, opportunities you never imagined become possible." There was a message in her words, but it wasn't spoken with bitterness. It was spoken with the wisdom of someone who had learned to trust her own strength rather than relying on others to save her. "I heard about Isabella's program at Columbia," Daniel said carefully. "She must be thrilled." Elena's face lit up with pure joy. She's spending her summer working with real marine biologists, studying coral samples and learning about ocean conservation. She comes home every day with new facts about sea life, and Dr. Martinez says she has never seen a child with such natural curiosity about marine ecosystems. She sounds incredible. She gets that from her mother. Elena looked at him more closely, perhaps hearing something in his voice that he hadn't intended to reveal. "Mr. Chen, can I ask you something?" "Of course." When you were pretending to be Danny when we talked about dreams and struggles and hope, was any of that real for you? Or was it all just research for improving your company culture? Daniel considered the question, knowing that his answer mattered more than any board presentation or investor meeting he had ever given. It was the most real I had been in years, maybe in my entire adult life. You reminded me that success without human connection is just expensive loneliness. You taught me that the most important stories aren't in quarterly reports. They're in conversations at 3 in the morning with people who work hard and love deeply and never give up on their dreams. Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching people emerge from the subway entrance, office workers heading home to families and lives that existed beyond corporate towers and profit margins. "I was angry at you for a long time," she said finally. "Not just because you lied, but because I had started to believe that someone could care about me without wanting anything in return. When I learned who you really were, I felt like a fool for trusting you." "You weren't a fool. You were kind. You saw someone you thought needed friendship, and you offered it freely. That says everything about who you are and nothing about what you should have known." "I understand why you did it," Elena continued, "and I even understand why you felt like you had to lie. But Daniel, the next time you want to understand how your employees live, try asking them directly. Try creating an environment where people feel safe telling you the truth about their struggles and their dreams. Try seeing people as more than job titles and payroll numbers. I have been. The scholarship programs, the health care improvements, the advancement opportunities. I've been implementing everything we talked about during those nights." Elena smiled, and for the first time since he had revealed his true identity, it was the warm, genuine smile he remembered from their conversations in empty offices. "I know," Miguel told me. "He said things have really changed around here, that employees feel more valued and heard." "That's good, Daniel. That's what leadership should look like." The sound of his first name on her lips sent a jolt through Daniel's chest. It was forgiveness and recognition, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something new. "Elena, I know I have no right to ask this, but would you consider having coffee with me sometime? Not as a CEO and former employee, but as two people who once shared instant coffee and real conversations in the middle of the night?" Elena adjusted her textbook again, considering his request. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "I understand. I just want you to know that those conversations changed me. You changed me. I'm a better person because I knew you, and I'm a better leader because you taught me what real strength looks like." Elena looked at him one final time, her expression soft but resolute. "Maybe someday, Daniel. When I finish my degree and Isabella starts her marine biology career, maybe we can have that coffee. But this time, no lies between us." "No lies," Daniel agreed, watching as she disappeared into the subway crowd, carrying her textbooks and dreams toward a future she had built with her own hands. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.